Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Martin Sklenár.
Good afternoon. Hi. And it's not just me, I'm bringing the whole panel with me, so, it's not just Martin Sklenár, it's everybody that I'm going to talk about. We're so excited you are here with us, and please find your seats. Let me just stand for a while so that I can see all of you. My beautiful panel here for the NATO discussion on this Friday afternoon. And we're going to talk about the NATO summit this year, 2025, and can Europe step up? And as we were putting together this panel, we have the privilege of having great members of the panel. As you can see, General Philip Breedlove, former SACEUR. We have Oana Lungescu, the former spokesperson of NATO. Then we have General Denis Mercier, former SACT in NATO, and we have Ambassador Mustafa Pulat from Turkey, who's for me this is representing a small NAC meeting. So that's what we're going to do. Just discuss policy, NATO, the summit, and how are Europeans seeing this. I'm very glad that you made it here to the Albright stage. I hope you're very comfortable in the couches. This is my favorite room anyway. So let's dive right into that. Thank you very much for being with us and talking on the NATO summit. Obviously, everybody is concerned about how Europe is doing and how we can scale up the industry and what is the challenge and what is the threat. And in a couple of days, basically, in a few days, couple of weeks, the Europeans will come to The Hague and they will meet the rest of NATO, so to say. What do you think they will encounter? How should they get prepared for this? And how is this? How has the alliance changed? That's my first question to all of you, and I'll go through the panel here just to get your impressions. How difficult it is, because we have seen President Trump arriving in Brussels for summits in the previous term, and how do we put this diplomatically? It didn't go well all the time. General, you want to start us off?
Sure. First of all, thanks to the organizers. It's always good to be back at GLOBSEC, and thanks for allowing me to be on this panel. I've been in 8 capitals in the last 5 weeks, and I get some very consistent questions and conversations, and most of those, of course, revolve around the leadership in the United States and how it's going to act. And I continually say, I don't know. And anybody that tells you they do know, you should turn off your recording device and put your pencil down, because I'm not sure our leadership truly knows where it's going sometimes. So I think that one of the themes that I'll just get off the question with real quickly is that despite, and this is coming from an American, despite the disruptive sort of way this is being rolled out, every summit has to address unity of thought, unity of purpose, and I think in this one more than ever, a unity in understanding what is going on in Ukraine, because we haven't always got that right either. We find divisions. And so I would just say one more time that for me, and talking in these 8 capitals, it's been about how do we come out of there and remember that we're NATO and not a dysfunctional group.
That's very true. Oana, unity, strong message coming out of The Hague. Do you think this is expected? And is it also the message that everybody wants to get out from this?
Well, as a former spokesperson, I can tell you that unity was always the message of every summit. And if you went around the table with the ambassadors, everybody said what we want out of the summit is unity. So this will also be on the minds of everybody around that table. What I think will also be on their minds, as you mentioned earlier, Martin, will be perhaps the 2018 NATO summit, which was perhaps one of the most tense that we were part of, where President Trump, in his first term, literally went around the table and berated most of the leaders there who were not meeting the 2% of GDP investment in defense target. Let me just say before that I think he was not wrong. He was brutal, but not wrong. And that was the message that we've heard from practically every American president, starting with Eisenhower, Kennedy, Obama, Biden, and of course Trump in his first term. So I think as this is his first summit in his second term, everybody wants to avoid what happened in 2018. Therefore, what we'll have is a short, sharp summit, a single working session with the 32 leaders only, focused on a single figure, which will be 5% of GDP on defense, so more than double the original target. And I think if we get that, that in itself will send that message of unity that we're seeking.
Well, we will see whether we get that and how far we get to that to the number. General Mercier, Denis, how do you see the Europeans arriving in The Hague? And is NATO still strong?
That's a good question, because I've seen that anytime we had a main geopolitical change in the world, we question NATO, how NATO will survive from that. And I've seen this question many times, and I saw that NATO has always adapted to the situation. But you know, this is not the good question. The good question is, do we have an organization, when we talk about the defense in Europe, where we could put the Americans, even if there's a big change in the American policy, we could put the Europeans, you could put Turkey, you can put all these nations together and talk about security. And the question should not be how NATO will die from what has changed very recently regarding geopolitical, geopolitical area. Says is, thanks God, we have NATO. So how we will adapt to that? How we will make this discussion? Because we have this organization bringing together the Americans, many the Europeans, and we discuss defense security, and we will find solutions, and we have always found solutions. So the key question would be for everybody to be really eager to say, yeah, this is this summit. How will it happen? I'm not afraid of it, because I know that we will find solutions, because hopefully we have NATO.
And we will get the strong messages of strong NATO, hopefully, with the 5% certainly. Let me turn to the ambassador. Ambassador, let me ask you a question about Türkiye, but also other countries. I know you're not representing those, but so everybody talks about the US and the Europeans talking in The Hague. But what's Türkiye's role? Norway, Canada, those are the countries that actually are a big part of the family of NATO countries. They are some of them are part of Europe, not Canada. But so what is the perspective here? How do you see this going on? And will you be looking for unity or something else from the summit?
Thank you, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation and to be with this August group. As Turkey, of course, we are an EU candidate country. I think this has not changed. We employ the second largest army in NATO. I agree, Denis, when he said that that's the best tool we have, and NATO is time-tested and approved with its experience, solidarity, dialogue, and consensus has been the strengths of NATO. I assume personally that this will be confirmed when you look at the statements of the Secretary General and also the individual countries' leaders. I think that will be a confirmation, and perhaps the coming period will be the further strengthening of the European pillar of NATO. That's also very important. I don't have the right to speak on behalf of the other countries you mentioned, but I think there are also interesting developments within the EU, like the SAFE mechanism and others. So I think the coming period may give us opportunities, but also challenges on non-EU countries, how they'll be involved in the defense industry procurement and joint investments and production.
And Türkiye has been on the front lines of many of the crisis situations going on. Do you still feel that NATO is providing added value for your position in the geography?
For sure. NATO is 76 years old. It has a very strong structure. It's prepared. It is adapting itself to the upcoming challenges. Of course, we are open societies. We sometimes discuss openly in front of the public certain things. That's normal. It's not a weakness for NATO, but obviously individual countries will have to come up with stronger commitments. I think we are going to see that coming in.
Yes, I guess my questions go into, we see a lot of discussion among NATO members, about what should we do, how do we position ourselves vis-a-vis support to Ukraine, everything. I mean, those are reasonable questions, right? I mean, and we are used to discussing this most of the times, not very much in the public, but, in the NATO family, we discuss everything. So what does it mean for deterrence, the new situation that we have, having this open dialogue in the public about the deterrence of NATO? Are there any concerns that you see, or is it good that we bring it out and talk about some of the different positions that we have also towards Ukraine? And President Zelensky will obviously be in a position to also talk with the leaders. Is it good for NATO deterrence that we have this open discussion, generals?
I think transparency adds strength to deterrence, but I would like to just for a minute talk just about deterrence.
Yes.
Because it's very concerning. I think our nuclear deterrence at the strategic level remains very strong. We've got the right people doing it and the capabilities out there. At the tactical nuclear level, I think we're beginning to see problems, and it's very concerning for me. The way that Russia talks about nukes all the time, and Mr. Putin most recently saying he hopes we can get through this war without having to use nukes. I see that the fabric of that break point is beginning to crack when it comes to tactical nuclear, and I think that as an alliance we've got to shore up the understanding by Mr. Putin that going tactical nuclear is not an answer. Even worse, on the conventional side, I believe we still have strong conventional deterrence within our alliance, but sadly, because of the way some of our leaders have characterized our conventional deterrence, AKA, we're going to defend every inch of NATO. Mr. Putin then hears everybody outside of NATO is fair game, and we have, in my opinion, lost conventional deterrence outside of NATO spaces. And I think we need to re-earn that for our European brothers and sisters. And then finally, I'm pretty vocal about the gray zone, the hybrid zone. We have never had any deterrence whatsoever in the gray zone or the hybrid zone. And Mr. Putin and other countries like his are running amok in our capitals in the gray zone. So I think deterrence is something that the alliance will have to face in the future and really make some improvement.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting, and we could speak about hybrid influence from the context that I come from. But Denis, please.
And just to build on what Philippe said, that for me, deterrence, whatever it's nuclear or conventional, is based on three pillars. It's based on the credibility of our forces, and the credibility of the forces is the number of forces, their equipment, their training, and the industry that goes with that. The second pillar is a political resolve. We need to be sure that we have a strong political resolve to use the forces. And the third pillar, this is the strategic communication that we send in order to demonstrate this political resolve. If we come out this summit with a much better pledge about our credibility, how we organize ourselves, how we organize our industry, we continue to train together, we have a common political resolve. And we are able to make a strong strategic message that will reinforce the deterrence, definitely.
Excellent. We're looking forward to that. Yes, Oana, please react.
I may just slightly disagree with Phil. We don't often disagree, but...
Not only this is me. But
we never disagree. But I would say deterrence for NATO allies holds. Mm-hmm. There has been no direct attack on NATO allies in a very dangerous, unpredictable environment with war returning to Europe. But I think there has to be a realization also among our publics that we are at war. Certainly Russia sees itself as being at war with us. And that's why we see this unprecedented campaign of destabilization and sabotage and arson and assassination and threats and disruption of critical infrastructure across Europe. from north to south. So I think that we need to make people much more aware of, through briefings of our intelligence chiefs, by our leaders actually making clear what's happening, and perhaps more attribution and more collective attribution. But I would say deterrence holds. The problem is for how long? Because we have also seen from our intelligence chiefs and from our chiefs of defense and from the Secretary General of NATO this warning that Russia is reconstituting its forces and could attack NATO territory within 3 to 5 years. And of course, we don't know. It may be 3 years, it may be less. So that's why it's so urgent that we do agree on significantly boosting our deterrence and defense in The Hague, and then get on to work.
Well, we have a good basis for that, with the ministers of defense, agreeing to the increased commitments and targets that member states, that NATO allies will be actually delivering. So let me turn to because you mentioned the urgency and the Russia threat, and this is very present in Europe, in most places, right? And Europe wants to do something about it, and we understand that it's like 3 to 5 years. That's the German narrative, I would say. Let's call it the German narrative, but it could be even less. We need to act really, really fast. So the Europeans will come to The Hague saying, we have this all rearm Europe. We are starting the safe loans. We are distributing the money. We will be developing the capabilities. We'll be increasing our forces. How does the US see this? Do they see this as an opportunity to say, okay, so now we can leave and basically leave Europe with less US forces on its? Is it like a self-fulfilling, situation that we're getting us into? And the more complicated way of looking at this would be, are the Europeans able to deal with a new US? I mean, not the US leadership, but in a transactional US relationship with within the alliance. So how do we, what is the balance between trying to be independent, but also keeping the US engaged in NATO? I think that's the $1 billion question, or 5% GDP question. I don't know. General?
I'd like to allow my colleagues to speak to the latter half of your question. And then if someone wants to ask me specifically in the questions, we could do that. I want to go to the very first. Denis will tell you, and there are a lot of ex-military in the room here, that we've had across the decades a sort of formula that most nations talk about: readiness. And they talk about our ability to fight tonight, meaning current, right now readiness, and then investment in long-term readiness. It's a part of where the 20% of 2% came, if you remember those conversations. And I think that what Mr. Putin is doing in Europe, Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, and what he's doing in our capitals, shutting off a gas pipeline in America and so forth, that we are in a position where we're almost now having to rethink a little bit about, do we have an appropriate amount of current readiness because of the immediacy of this, I hear 2 to 5 years. And that is an interesting dilemma for nations who have sort of been on a march through this sort of thing. Our parliaments and congresses, it's not a big deal for them to invest in exercises, ammunition, munition stores, all the things that give you readiness today, tonight, for the appropriate response to a Russian incursion. And I'll just stop by saying I think that across the capitals I've been in the last 5 weeks, each capital is trying to work through this problem of how do we get our current fight tonight readiness to a responsible level, but continue modernization. And it's a tough problem to have.
Well, that's and it gives you the deterrence that you actually need, and without even fighting, which is basically what we want to see, right? Stability and peace. Denis and Oana, let me tap into your European background, right? So what can the Europeans do? Can they mount a case for the US to stay in Europe and not leave? And what are the arguments?
I've seen very recently some kind of a shift, which is very interesting for me. just a few years ago, when we talked about the European pillar in NATO, I faced many nations who were very reluctant to mention it because they said if we mention that too much, there is a risk that the Americans take it and then withdraw or diminish their presence in NATO. So it's no longer the case, which is very good because that means that we recognize now that if we think more European in NATO, we recognize that will strengthen NATO. And that's a good thing because it was even an excuse for some European nations to say, no, we should not do that, and then the American will do everything. No, now we recognize that we need to do that. And this shift is very interesting because this is a way to, I like the fact that in NATO, we focus on the defense on Europe, and not the European defense, but the defense on Europe associates all the nations we talked about. And this is very good that this is not any longer a taboo to mention it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Oana, you want to add?
Yeah, I think we also, we've seen a small shift in the US rhetoric on NATO, for instance, in Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth's speech at the Shangri-La conference, not as great as GLOBSEC, of course, but still, where he basically praised the Europeans, having just come from the meeting of NATO defense ministers, for being willing to step up to the plate and seeing the emerging consensus on 5% of GDP on defense and actually encouraging America's Asian allies to follow suit, which is an interesting approach. So I think there is, I think, a real possibility that the Trump administration will see this as a win for the US, but I think for the Europeans and the Canadians and obviously our Turkish allies who are in Europe, this is also a win. Because finally, after lots of wake-up calls, which were only half heard, right, from 2008, 2014, 2022, I think this is a moment of truth. And we can turn it into a win-win. And if I could just add one small word on resilience, of course, when you talk about 5% of GDP on defense, we're actually talking about 2 bits of that investment plan, which will be 3.5% on core defense capabilities and 1.5% on defense-related topics such as resilience, infrastructure for reinforcement, and cyber.
And we're going to hope that that's going to be, a strong enough case to do that. Denis, before I give you the floor again, let me put it just a little bit further away, the discussion that we're having on the European and US, or on the NATO and EU relationship, which is a rather an institutional one. We have been always talking about we don't need any unnecessary duplications on the side of the European Union, right? It looks like we are now forced to look into what are the necessary duplications. So please come in, and if you have a list of the necessary duplications, share with us.
Yeah, I would advise to avoid duplications, but complementarity is one thing very important. I would like to mention the command and control. In fact, that NATO is the only organization that has a full command and control structure, which is in place, which is multinational, which works, which is exercised, and we see with our Ukraine friends that we can do command and control differently in a very agile way, very distributed command and control, and I believe that it could be the role of European nations based on the different organizations that they have to bring that together and to work together and see how we can build, in addition to the structure of NATO, something that is more agile, that could be used for different nations, for different missions. The only thing, and this is what I want to insist on, and there is the main risk that we are facing together, if we develop more European pillar and we have the American on the side, the risk is the interoperability. So NATO must be continuously strong at developing the interoperability, whatever we develop, whatever the initiative we develop with the new technologies, we need to be interoperable, and we need to be sure that this remains absolutely at the core of what we are developing in NATO. If we do that, all initiative will be welcome.
That's right, and the European Union can actually do a lot in terms of interoperability and standardization. Ambassador, feel free to comment on what do you expect the Europeans, how to bring you in Turkey to make sure that this is a strong enough case for the US to also remain in Europe. But let me also turn to some of the Slido questions, and one in particular, and you are a very mature audience, you know exactly how this goes. Thank you very much for doing that. The question says that if NATO raises spending to 5% of GDP, that's and the number that they are using is $1.58 trillion. Which is over 10 times that of the spending of Russia. And maybe that's too much. Maybe we should ignore Russia and just spend the effort on something else rather bigger than something like China. What do you think? I mean, you might have a little bit of a very perspective, coming from one of the most eastern countries in NATO. So it seems logical.
Thank you, Martin. You see, I think we have a fire in the house, and that's Ukraine. First, we have to quell the fire, achieve some kind of ceasefire, and a sustainable peace process may follow that. We have been extensively trying at our leadership level, to my minister, to achieve that. So I think the NATO's priority, my personal opinion, has to be securing the borders of NATO and strengthening deterrence. And for us, it starts with the individual deterrence. We, as a NATO member country, we have been investing a lot on our national capacity building, on defense industry products, but also preparation. So individual preparedness will bring in further contributions to NATO. I think we follow what our EU friends are doing within their domain. And if successful, what they have envisaged may bring in opportunities and build further trust, if that is, applied to all NATO members. But we know their limitations, obviously. But I think this is an opportunity and a challenge. We see that.
Let me on the opportunity, right? And the biggest opportunity I see is actually the industry, the defense industry, right? Sure. We need to scale up quickly. What opportunities do you see there with the Turkish companies coming in and helping scale up Europe's capabilities, capacities, and the supply chains, right?
I think we are ready and willing to cooperate, like we have established this cooperation with our Italian friends. I think there is a large room for cooperation in that sense, and that is achievable. But from the bureaucratic or political sense, we may not be able to fully grasp the dynamics of the industry itself. So it's better to open the avenues for them, and then they will find ways. Maybe this is simplistic, but this is, I think, perhaps a more attainable avenue that we can choose.
Sometimes it looks like they need a little bit of push, so there needs to be the political will and the commitment and the opening the doors by the political representation. So I hope at the summit we will also see this, that the leaders basically declare their willingness to use whatever capacity there is for the defense industry to scale up the capacities and capabilities in Europe. This is what we want to see, right? Of course, I understand the urge to secure the supply chain in Europe, but how do we do it so quickly? I mean, the 2 years, even if you mention generals, that's basically it could happen anytime, right? How do we make this? How do we plug in these other countries? Why do we need them? Why do we need them involved for even the interoperability? How do we do that if we have many countries? Denis, you want to make sure that the industry does the interoperability, not only the forces, but also the industry?
Yeah, the question of industry, as I mentioned, is a question of credibility as well of our forces. So that's very important that we continue to look at what the industry is doing. And probably we have just focused on the main industrial base. I mean, the big primes that are making the ships, the aircraft and everything. But we should look further than that, I believe. And we should look at the capacity, because the technologies are there, the capacity of the industry to modernize modernize, to innovate, and to bring capacities, military capabilities cheaper, to build them quicker, and to have more agility to produce them. And the traditional industrial base, they are not ready to do that, and I think this is very important that we push them to that. We have new players who are showing the way, and that's a key issue because we need this agility, and this agility can be brought by the industry, providing that we encourage and even incentivize the industry to move forward and to be more agile. In fact, just if you wonder what I mean by that, as look at the automotive sector and how the Chinese have disrupted the automotive sector, even with their industry, able to provide new cars very quickly, much quicker than what we have done. And everybody said that it would be impossible in the automotive industry to jump in so fast. So there are possibilities to do that, and we need to look at it, and we need to do that for our defense industry as well.
I agree completely, and yes, Oana, please feel free to comment.
Yeah, I think the summit will certainly send a signal to defense industry across the alliance that we need to boost both the scale and the speed of what we do. We need to work much more closely together, and that's something that's been discussed at least for the last 3 years, so this is the time to do it. Just to answer to the question, at least in part, I think the 5% target, I mean, we need to first think that during the Cold War, probably the average was 4 to 5% at least. And this figure is not just pulled out of thin air. It comes from the new defense plans, which were developed by General Cavoli, Phil's successor, in the wake of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And then those plans were assessed by our commanders and our defense planners to find the gaps in the capabilities that are needed to turn those plans into reality should we need to. And from those gaps, they extracted the capability requirements that each ally actually agreed to. And that's how we get to the actual target of 5% of GDP. And I think you really can't compare it with what Russia is spending, because number one, we don't know how much Russia is spending. It's a black box. Number two, it's much cheaper. And number three, they have an economy, a war economy, which is certainly not what we have.
Mm-hmm. And let me build on that and rephrase one of the questions that we also get from Slido. From what you're saying, you know, this is the requirement. So it actually looks like it should be less important whether we spend 5% of GDP, but if we get the the quality that we need to get out of it, if we get the capabilities, we can always do that. Would it be easier to measure? I see the general having like a very emotional reaction to this.
So if we really started doing a good job investing now, which arguably we haven't done so well in the past, but if we did a really good job at investing right now and we kept investing at our old rate, how do we overcome 30 years of procurement holiday? We've been trying to hug the bear for 30 years. We should have seen it a long time ago. He has no intention of being a partner. And now, in order to try to catch up on the deficit of 30 years of not investing, we have to change something.
Mm-hmm. And it was not only a holiday, but since there was no money and basically almost no need, right? Then we made it so complicated to procure stuff that it takes us now forever. And we forgot about that we were able to do it much quicker. And now we say we think it's the basis to do procurement over years, basically.
In some of our countries, and mine is the worst, I think, during this time, we actually created laws that limit our industry's ability to build excess capacity. They would be penalized if they used money in a current contract to build excess capacity. So we now, as in my nation, I can speak to it for sure, we have to figure out how we incentivize but be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, but incentivize our industry so that they can create excess capacity so that we can surge when we have to surge.
Denis?
Yeah, I agree, but one of the things is we see that we need to provide more mass, and this is what we say, and we're right when we say that. But this mass is not the same aircraft, ships, tanks, and everything. This is in addition to that. These are the new systems that we see in the current area of operations that are very effective and that are much cheaper. We can produce them much quicker, and again, they are very effective. Talking about drones, about satellites in low orbit, and and tomorrow we will see more missiles and everything that we can produce in mass. That they will have a high level of autonomy sometimes, bolstered by artificial intelligence, and we will be able to produce them with more agility, and this is why. Yes, I agree with Philippe and said that 30 years we have not been good at that, but now we have new military capabilities that we can build where it's different. We can imagine even new areas of cooperation to build them. So we are in the beginning of a new era for that. And what we have done in the past, learn from that. But with this new object, I truly believe that we can really, if we invest correctly, figure out what our weaknesses, our shortfalls, and move forward and have the right capabilities we need.
Ambassador, is it easy to work with the populations to support some of the very difficult changes that we need to do, right?
I think you read my mind. I have been thinking about this, but for the sake of providing optimism, I was refraining to...
Please do.
But not required.
We suffered the long pandemic. The chains have been broken. We have lost a degree of competitiveness. China is coming in super fast. We have been involved in our domestic affairs. There are certain domestic issues in various countries. That's true for everyone, more or less, because we have to cut down the funds that normally would be going to welfare and social support programs. But now we have to face this dilemma to invest more in defense. So it is an uphill battle for our politicians to explain this to the public, and politics is a tough business. So public opinions usually tend to believe that, oh, this is far away to me, what will happen to me? But from NATO experience, we know that we have to be prepared to be deterrent because we want peace. So that's a tough equation to sell. But at least on the political consensus side, personally, I see that there is a cohesion, regardless of what may be coming up as some political statements. I think it will be there, and more importantly, we have to have also cool heads, and we also need to think mechanisms like OSCE. And also the arms limitations. I know it's not the timing is not right for this kind of discussion, but the last piece of instrument that has provided good security for the continent is going to expire next year. So this is another matter that we have to keep in mind always.
But on the topic of public awareness, it looks like, because when you go outside, it's peaceful, nice weather, people, going about their lives, going to their jobs. Here in Prague, certainly, right? In many places in Europe, it looks like there's no war. So if it was a little bit more difficult of a situation, would people understand more what the reasoning why we need to do this? How can the NATO summit send the messages that we are actually in war and Russia is in war with us? We might not want to be in a war. Obviously, that's not our interest. Even if you look at the questions, right? Russia is attacking NATO members. That doesn't seem like peace. That's something that we should take into account. Why is it so calm in the population, and why is not the sense of urgency, being heard?
I think it is important, as I was saying earlier, to tell people about the range of dangers that we face. And obviously there's also the challenge from China. It's not just Russia. And overall, what we see is this alignment of the authoritarian powers of Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, all of these supporting Russia in its illegal war of aggression against Ukraine, which is why it's so important that the summit does send a message of unity. Obviously, we should not create panic among people, but I think it's really important that we keep stressing the need for readiness and preparedness, which is why I think, the issue of resilience and just getting people used to the fact that, yes, we do have to be prepared for the first 72 hours of any crisis, and it could be conflict, but it could also be floods or something else, and we need to look after ourselves, and it's up to every individual and every nation to be prepared in a world that is clearly unpredictable. I think people do realize that. I don't think that that's a surprise. Without panic, but being ready to do whatever it takes.
All right, thank you very much. So we're coming towards the end of our discussion. Let me put the attention of it now towards the future. What do you expect will be the outcomes of the summit? We already talked about the 5%. Maybe I'm more interested in about the stuff that is not very obvious, that you would, as connoisseurs of NATO, would actually look for in the summit communique or in the media messages that will be coming out, just to make sure that you see what is the level of unity, the level of confidence, or even maybe who are the leaders on the European side, mostly, who are actually able to have a discussion at NATO with the US and with others, and provide the leadership that we need. Any specific situations? I mean, we speak about deterrence and some of the capabilities, right? The 400% of integrated air missile defense increase, that seem to be obvious, but are also numbers that who can imagine what is 400% of?
A lot.
Yes, exactly. That's
a lot than what we
could
have
be a
now.
lot, could be a lot. So what will be actually the kind of things that you will be looking for, the small details that should come out of the NATO summit?
I will be looking for the timeline. I think time will be the test of the success of this summit. And of course, there's an ongoing negotiation now with countries like Canada, Italy, Spain, that haven't really reached even 2% right now, saying, no, we should get another decade to reach 5% until 2035. Then we have the countries of the Baltic region and Poland saying, well, actually, it should be more like 2030 if we're looking at Russia reconstituting in 5 years. And Secretary General Rutte trying to find the middle way and saying, well, maybe 2032, 7 years from now. So we'll have to see what happens there. Obviously, then implementation, how do we actually ensure that this is not just a pledge, but a real plan that will be followed up. And I would say the third thing is Ukraine. We won't have probably very extensive reference to Ukraine, but if we can get support to Ukraine from NATO allies included in the 5% target, that will already be much more than what we have now, when only support to Ukraine that is channeled through NATO trust funds, which is all non-lethal support, actually counts. So that will also be an incentive for NATO allies to maintain and hopefully increase support to Ukraine over the next decade.
Sounds like a complex result. That would be a great summit to have. Gentlemen, what would you be looking for? Ambassador, let me start there, and maybe we'll make our way here and end the discussion.
I think investing in critical infrastructure and critical capabilities will be a good way to strengthen the alliance and to give the image to the public that we just don't talk, but we establish partnerships. We aim for concrete results through cooperation and good coordination with the guidance of the Secretariat. I think that could be a good deliverable in my view.
Thank you very much. Denis?
I will re-insist on the three pillars of the deterrence, and the credibility, and I agree, goes with the timeline and with the plan. This is what we say, but we have a good plan, and we know when we are going to do that. And in the political resolve, this is a unity, but if we can even show that even as European, we are really showing this political resolve, and together with American friends. So this would be important, because it has not always been the case in the past, with some countries really focusing on the east, some others focusing on the south. And this is a way to show that European pillar, and together with the Americans and the other countries who are not in the European Union. And the third one, this is this very strong strategic communication. I hope that we will have something strong in the strategic communication based on what we have said.
All right, General, and let me add another layer to that complexity. And if we don't make the timeline right, and I agree that will be one important thing, don't we make this even more acute?
We do. Let me answer the last one, because I really want to get to the first question a little bit. I think we have a window. Some people say it's as short as 2 years. Others say it's as long as 5 years. We have a window now where we can really, quote unquote, get our act together to be better prepared. And as the ambassador so eloquently said, when you are prepared, you deter. And so we need to be investing in that right now. I want to be controversial now. We, and most of you remember when there was a time where we could not call Russia the enemy. Mm-hmm. Our plans did not call them the enemy. None of the planning in association with the plans, we didn't identify them as the enemy. When we finally did in our documents, it was a short period where everyone coalesced around the idea that, yes, we have to be focused on this problem because this problem is an enemy. And I think as we approach to try to get to the peace process, everybody's trying to make fun and good with everybody, and we're beginning to again forget that Russia is an enemy. It has no intention whatsoever of being a partner. It has no intention whatsoever at finding peace unless it is completely on their terms, meaning complete capitulation of the West and Ukraine to their terms. And I think this is a little controversial, I'm sure, but I think we need to have a re-understanding of what Russia is and how they have to be dealt with.
Can we expect that message from the summit?
I'm going to be pushing it, I can tell you that, but that we don't count anymore. I'm growing camouflage. People can't tell who I am anymore.
Okay, maybe we shouldn't have started with introducing you as the first person here then. Well, thank you. This is our discussion. If there are any pressing questions, we still have a couple of minutes left. But if not, let me invite you to thank the panel and to spend the rest of the minutes just to stretch your legs a little bit before you dive into the next session of today on the topic of an invisible threat, why the shadow economy matters for security, which will start here in basically 2 minutes.
I just wanted, so that we're not all too happy leaving this, especially after Phil's. I think the other thing that we need to look at beyond the summit will be the US posture review in Europe. Obviously, every administration, almost every administration does that. Hopefully, the summit will set a good basis for the conversation with our American allies, so that when there are any reductions in troops and indeed maybe capabilities, which would be even more problematic, that is done in a staged and synchronized way and coordinated way, so that there are no gaps that the Europeans are not able to fill, because that would leave a massive gap in our deterrence, and that is a worry to me.
That would be a concern for many. Well, on that happy note, I guess, let me thank you and the panelists and you for the questions. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.
Bravo. Bravo.